Hello and welcome to part 3 of the Spitfire series, and here we are at Goodwood, and yes, that engine is running, which means we finally get to go flying. We've had a couple of parts to this series now where we've been on the ground talking about things, but now we're actually going to get in the air and see what this beautiful machine can do. So just to recap what we've looked at so far, in part 1 we looked at the exterior and the interior of the aircraft, looking at the cockpits, pointing out some of the features, talking about the 3 different propeller types that we have in this aircraft. In part 2 we looked at how you actually start the aircraft, how you test it, how you check all the installations, and how you do the run-up. Hopefully in approaching it this way has given you more of a background to the aircraft, so that before we actually take it flying you've got a better appreciation of how things work, how things are laid out in the cockpit, and just a bit of background on some of the things that you need to have a look at as we are taking to the air. So part 3 we're going to cover takeoff and climb, cruise, stalls, spinning, poor weather and low visibility, and as we do these we're going to point out some other features, some other points of interest, little bits and pieces to remember that will help. Okay, so here we are just at the hold for runway 14 at Goodwood. Before we go ahead we're just going to do our quick final preparation for takeoff checks, and these are really TMP flaps, that's the catchphrase to remember. So first of all we're going to T trimming tabs for elevator, and that's down here. I get my mouse to work, there we go, and we are looking to get 1 notch of nose down. So I'm just turning the wheel here. In the sim it's this wheel here. Makes a heck of a difference having that 1 notch down. Gives you a much smoother takeoff, as we'll see, hopefully. Mixture control rich, which it is. Remember in the Spitfire mixture is back rather than in the Cessna where it's forward if you want the rich position. Propeller is fully fine and flaps are up. If you inadvertently take off with flaps down, make sure that you don't raise them until you are above 120 miles an hour, and certainly raise them before you hit 140, because otherwise it's going to get interesting for you. So let's line up and let's go. So stick back, just gently ease her on. Check nothing's coming, of course. No. There we go. Temperature's looking fine, certainly below our 100 maximum. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull the stick right back so we've got full elevator up, and then we're going to put it over to the right to give us full right aileron. Okay, so today crosswind, haven't got much. We've got about 6 knots coming from 189. Maximum crosswind on the Spit is 20 miles an hour, or 17, just over 17 knots. So we're well within that and we are good to go. Quick look around, everything's looking fine. Okay, let's go. So let's apply some power. And I'm going to release the brakes, and as we do that we start using the rudder to centralise the aircraft, and at the same time adding more power, easing it in and pushing the stick to the central position. And then eventually the nose comes up on its own, the tail rather, and that's because of our trim. And now we're good to go. She just lifts off. Gear up. Pull back on the power to boost 2. And we're going to pull the RPMs back to 2,600. And close the canopy. Quick look around. Good gear up. Our red indicator has gone flush into the wing. We are good to go. So we're looking for about 180 miles an hour climb speed, best climb speed, and that's actually just going over it a bit now. We're going to do a left turn. RPM has dropped a bit. Let's put that up to back to 2,600. Going a bit slow now. So let's put the nose back down. Keep that 180 miles an hour. And there we have a climb out. If you wanted to do a more of a power climb, then you would put the boost up to 6. But we're being gentle today. A bit of buffet as we climb, as you can see. But otherwise, all is looking good. So, what about the Mark 1? Okay, so in our good old Mark 1 we have the additional challenge of the undercarriage situation. So first of all we have to select gear up and then grab our lever and keep pumping away. Watching the speed there, it's a little bit low. We've now got good gear indication. Now that gives you a pretty good idea of what it would have been like for the poor pilot, because what you're actually having to do, and if you want to make it really realistic, is take your left hand off the throttle. I pause there because it depends on how you've got your setup, but I have my left hand on the throttle. So what I have to do is, as they would have done in the Spit, is take the left hand from the throttle, put it onto the stick, and then right hand onto pump the gear. And that, whilst you're trying to do everything else, can be a little bit tricky. Right, so here we are back again in the Mark II. So what we also need to do, which we really would have done earlier had we not been waffling, is we check that our oil pressure is above 60 pounds, and it is. So that is looking good. Quick look around the rest of the cockpit just to check that all our T's and P's are looking fine, and they are. Okay, so now what we want to do is change our radiator setting. So temperatures are actually doing really nicely, so we're going to bring our lever back to the red triangle. That's our normal setting. That's where we're going to have it most of the time, unless we're doing anything particularly well, say for example you're doing a high power climb, you might want to open it a notch, or if you're flying in particularly hot weather. But the thing with the radiator is that it kind of can work against you, in that you can actually open the radiator to the point where it's creating more drag, which is slowing you down. And really it's all about getting airflow through the radiator. So you're looking for at least 180 miles an hour, and a really good cruise speed setting is at about 200 miles an hour. That gives you good airflow into the radiator, gives you good fuel economy, and it makes sure you can have the radiator on the red triangle without causing any issues. Feels good to be flying, doesn't it? Okay, so we've gone a bit above the 180 now, just raised the nose slightly, checking the power settings are all still there, but we are climbing nicely. Momentarily going to IMC. That really is kind of it as far as climbing goes. If you want a more shallower climb, say you were doing circuits, then you would probably just maybe have the boost a bit lower than I had it and just gently climb into the circuit. If you really wanted to go to town, you could put the boost to +6, but we're just taking it easy, we're just doing a nice gentle climb. now in our climb, as we pass 10,000 feet, we need to be going onto oxygen. So first of all, let's put on our mask. Just check that's on, and then open our valve. There we go, oxygen coming in now. Set the initial altitude for about 15,000 feet. We're in the climb. And let's head to 18,000 feet. So we're in a nice climb here. We've got the RPM at 2,600, boost at +2. We're climbing at just a smidgen under 2,000 feet a minute, and we are, what's that, about 195 miles an hour there, not too bad. And just coming up to pass through 17,000 feet. Just going to increase the regulator a little bit, or rather adjust the setting, the altitude to 18,000 feet, because that is where we're going to level off. Time to enjoy a bit of scenery. And there you have that iconic elliptical wing. Such a beautiful shape, but a large part of the design came out of needing somewhere to stow the gear and stow the weapons. Incredible how something so beautiful came out of something with such a deadly purpose. So levelling off now. So going to go into cruise configuration now. Throttle back a little bit. As you can see, as I bring the RPM back, I need to increase the throttle. The throttle is actually now wide open. Putting the RPM to 2000. Now we go for mixture lean. Let's have a quick look around, check all our T's and P's. Good, everything's fine. Radiator's good, oil's good. Oil pressure, fuel pressure is good. Yeah, happy with that. Okay, now let's imagine that we have lost our gyro, so we're relying solely on the compass. We want to turn onto a heading of 270. So let's unlock the ring. We will, oh, it's already on there. We'll set 270 here against the little mark, and then we'll lock it down. What we now need to do is align this cross here back up with north again, and if we do that, that means that we are heading 270. So let's do that. So we'll do a gentle left turn. Starting to see that cross come round now. Came out of that a little bit too early. Okay, now just check the compass. Now, according to the compass, we are now. We check on north, pretty much on a heading of 270 with a big bit of give or take. Gyro is showing something slightly different. But only ever so slightly. Actually now it's drifting a little bit more. But if anything, this kind of shows you the challenge of flying using these old instruments. Just drifting over, so we'll just do a gentle left turn again. Bring us back in. I'm not really flying off the gyro, I'm flying off the compass here. There we go. So, quick look down. Compass is saying 270. Gyro is saying 279. So let's, just to test it, let's do the old cheat button. So I pressed D. Gyro had gone out a bit, and it's actually saying, what's that, 276. We've drifted a little bit. If I now bring that back so that the cross is on north on the compass, there we go. You also have the advantage of the east-west line on the compass rose. You can actually use that to line up with the 270 in this case. But you can see we're actually now thereabouts. Now, we were off by a few degrees because the gyro had slipped slightly. And that's, again, another example of how the gyro can sometimes not quite add up with what the compass is saying. So kind of trust your compass really, keep an eye on the gyro and make sure that you're calibrating it. Now let's talk about one of the well-known quirks of these early Spits that the German Luftwaffe soon got wind of and used to use to their advantage. So here we are, nice straight level flight, got cruise settings, but that doesn't really matter. Now imagine if we were in a dogfight. There's a 109 right in front of us, and suddenly he makes a dive for the ground. Let's follow him. Oh dear, engine just cut out. Now that was a phenomenon that was a right royal pain in the backside for the RAF pilots, and a fantastic female engineer Beatrice Schilling came along with an ingenious solution, because what's actually happening is the throttle valve is flooding with fuel as we point the nose down. The open carburetor there is just all this fuel is just flooding in and it's cutting the engine out. So what she did was to place a brass ring which actually restricts the airflow to the bare minimum, which gave the pilot the opportunity just to have a moment of negative G to follow the 109 down into the ground. Well, not quite down into the ground, but towards the ground, you understand what I mean. And then in 43 they actually got around the issue by using a pressure carburetor to get around the issue. But that was one of the early quirks. The way the Battle of Britain guys got round the issue was that when the 109 was in front of them and suddenly decided to take a dive for the ground, they had to roll like this and then bringing the aircraft down. At this point they may have lost sight of the M109 under the nose, but they then judged the right moment and bring the nose back up again. Okay, so let's now look at stalling. One of the beautiful things about this design of this elliptical wing is that this stall, when it starts, only starts in part of the wing. It starts on the inboard section, and what this actually means is that you, as a pilot, feel the stall before it actually goes across the whole wing, so it just gives you a bit more warning time. So let's chop the power back a bit. There's the judders, and nose goes down, but fairly gentle, picking the speed back up. So you get an idea there. You get a lot of feedback from the sim via the Accu-sim, which is just such a brilliant piece of technology that actually allows you to feel that stall a lot earlier than when it actually happens. Stalling characteristics are very gentle. So let's now go for a spin. And I don't mean a fun spin. Just shake, there's the shake. And now we go into a spin. So, centre the controls, opposite rudder, and up we go. So there you have it. This is one of the great things about the Spit, and I strongly urge you to head to the Mustang next, because that's a much tougher aircraft to get to grips with. A lot more unforgiving when you start chucking it around. I actually learned spin recovery in the Mustang trying to loop it, and I was looping it the wrong way. And luckily a chap on the A2A community, Rob Wilkinson, who's actually a real warbird pilot, was able to point me in the right direction of how to do it. Okay, so let's now pretend that the visibility is really poor. The weather's really closed in. You're really looking to do, because we haven't got modern avionics in this aircraft, is to slow us down. That's the safe thing to do. Something that you may already know, or you may have wondered, this little oval shape here, what is that about? That's actually a breakout panel. So if, for example, we had severe icing and the de-icer wasn't coping with it, if we had any other kind of visibility problem, oil smeared all over the front of the canopy, if we had a severe condensation situation inside the canopy, then we break that panel, and it at least gives us some kind of a clue, gives us some kind of visibility that we wouldn't normally have. So that's what that oval is all about. Anyway, so really, you know, we're just talking about flying slowly, which isn't particularly rocket science. So we would just throttle back. I've kept the pitch in our cruise setting. So watch the speed come off there. Very nice day for it. Anyway, let's not get distracted. Let's bring the speed back. As we bring the speed back, of course, we're now going below our magic 180 180 miles an hour, so let's open the radiator all the way. What you can also do if you're flying really slowly and below 140 miles an hour is drop the flaps. Here we are, just slowly bleeding off some speed. Now down to 140 miles an hour. You can see the temperatures are good, even though we're going slowly, the temperatures are still stable where they are at the moment. Now, just out of interest, let's drop the flaps. Now when I drop the flaps, you'll see the nose will dip down. When we do landing practice, you'll see that we need to anticipate that. Watch that speed, drop down now, it's like a brick. And you see how I'm now having to add power. So that's increasing the temperatures in our engine. It's also burning a lot more fuel. And as you will see from the radiator temperature gauge, our temperature starts to rise now. To get to 220 miles an hour, I have to add quite a bit of power. And you can see that temperature's rising. So let's get the flaps up. Watch our speed increase again. And because we've got such a beautiful day, we don't need to fly slow in any clag. So just as we're tuning around a little bit, just quick words on temperatures. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on the temperature gauge, is plural, and anticipate what they're doing. It's better to catch a temperature spike before it really kicks in rather than just let it happen. So always keep an eye on those temperatures and see what they're doing. For example, if you see the oil temperature gauge is increasing, there's a good chance you need to drop your RPM. All that friction that you're creating is heating up the oil, and that could well be your problem. Radiator, as we've talked about, get the right setting on the radiator for the right speed or with the right speed, and you'll be okay. As soon as you start flying too slow, although it might be intuitive to chop power, fly slower to reduce temperature, actually you're just making the problem worse. You need that speed to get the air flowing nice and powerfully into the radiator to avoid any issues. So as you can see, the spit not only on the ground but in the air is a bit of a radiator monster. Once you get above 10,000 feet, it's not so much of an issue really, but certainly below it you need to keep an eye on that.
And so that is it for part 3. I hope it's been useful for you. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't watched the other episodes, check them out. And I'll see you soon.